Hello and welcome in returners. I'm doing a quick sound check. Kim, can you hear us?
Hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Yay.
This is Her Grounded Intelligence, a place for midlife plus women to slow down, come back to yourselves, and remember what it is you already know. This is a space for women who grew up before the rise of the internet and are actively remembering how to stay human in a world that keeps speeding up. Here we practice the art of the pause, return to what is essential, and recall the wisdom that lives within us. I'm your host, Liz Rosado-McGrath, and each week we'll explore how to come back to ourselves so that we can navigate change with clarity, steadiness, and what I call grounded intelligence. I'm so glad all of you are here today. Let's go ahead and just take a breath as we begin. We like to practice what we preach, so we're going to do one long and relaxed inhale, about 4 seconds. We're going to hold that breath for around 4 seconds and one long exhale, also about 4 seconds. So let's go ahead and do that now. Wonderful. This is our mini system reboot before we get started. Today, we are dedicating some time to talk about AI and feminine intuition. We're going to be addressing a question that's going to be our theme throughout the conversation, and that is, can intuition coexist with algorithms? While the world is not necessarily at war between these two things, I think we can acknowledge that there are some distinct differences, things that each of those concepts do well, and some that are unique to each of those. I'm very excited to welcome a special guest to assist us with this conversation, Kim Somers-Egelsee. Kim is an intuitive, a multiple #1 best-selling author, coach, podcaster, TEDx speaker, and co-founder of Publishing Joy. I could go on and on. Welcome to Her Grounded Intelligence, Kim, and thank you so much for being here with us today. Can you share a little bit more about your background and experience and why the topic of AI and feminine intuition is a timely one for us to talk about right now?
Yeah, thank you, Liz. Thanks for having me. I actually have been doing this work for over 20 years and been doing intuitive readings for over 20 years, as well as a lot of work on spirituality, spiritual and business and life coaching, speaking, etc. And as of the last year or so, I've taken a couple of really informative AI workshops, as well as researched a lot on AI due to publishing and marketing and coaching people on marketing as well. So it's definitely a fascinating topic.
Yeah, I love it. And like I said, I don't want to pit one against the other. I want us to talk about how these things coexist together. I'm just going to share a little bit of the research I looked at before deciding to talk about this today. And I'll start off with just some general ideas about what AI does well and why that's so important to us moving forward. I'll do the same for intuition, and then I'd love to get your thoughts on a few questions I've gathered. How does that sound?
Yeah.
Perfect. So some of the things we know that AI does really well is it's trained on reviewing and looking at past data. It is really superb at identifying patterns and predicting likely outcomes, and it does those things, among other things, of course, with record speed. So it really helps with looking up information, gathering data, those types of things. When I look at human intuition, some of the definitions that I found when I looked at that is human intuition helps us integrate our lived experiences. What it really does well is it reads subtle contexts like tone, energy, and meaning. And it operates even when data is incomplete or ambiguous. It can be shaped by what I call embodiment, emotion, and consciousness. So just given those sort of rudimentary summaries of those two things, one of the things I'd like us to talk about first, Kim, is What is intuition actually doing that AI, no matter how advanced, can absolutely not replicate?
Yeah, I think, there's so many types of intuition and ways that people receive messages. And intuition is knowing something without really knowing how you know it. I always feel like that sounds like a riddle. And so, a common thing that people receive messages is through claircognizance or clairsentience. Claircognizance is when the messages just float into your mind. Like they come into your mind and you're like, wait, where did that come from? I just got the answer, or I just got this whole paragraph of information and I have no idea where it came from. And then clairsentience is when you have a feeling. So sometimes you have a feeling of, oh my gosh, my body feels heavy and even maybe dark or low vibration, or just like there's an inner scale inside of me pointing to no. And that usually is giving you the sense that the answer is no or something is wrong. Whereas if something feels right, you might feel light in your body. You might feel a warmth, or your heart just feels like it's singing. And a lot of times that means yes, or this feels right, or this is the right answer. So those are just some examples. But AI can't give you a feeling unless you're reviewing AI and then you're getting your own intuitive feelings about it. That would be, how you can co-use them.
I like that. I like you focusing on how they can be co-used after talking about what intuition does so well that AI just cannot do. I like that. The next thing I'm wondering about is, do you see or have you seen women outsourcing their knowledge, since we're focusing on the feminine here, outsourcing their knowing to technology without maybe even realizing that that's what they're doing?
I think there's kind of an epidemic of people using AI and filters and AI advertising too much, to where there's some people that I observe on social media and that's all they do. And so you start to feel like, okay, every single advertisement they're doing or promotion is an AI flyer or AI wording, or even their images are AI images all the time. And you start to lose sight of like, who is this person really? They're becoming like almost where you feel like they're robotic, and the person is kind of getting like losing themselves in it because they're used to seeing the image of themselves as AI. So when they look in the mirror, their self-esteem actually decreases because they're going, wait, I don't look as beautiful as my AI image. So I would say that's one thing. And sometimes people get addicted to looking up answers or even, advice on AI instead of first accessing their intuition and kind of seeing what they get and then seeing if AI matches it.
That's really interesting. We're going to get in a few minutes to some suggestions for how to address that. And so I want to come back to that thought because both of those are really good examples. What does it look like to use AI as a tool without letting it override your inner authority? You talked about reviewing AI information and then seeing if your intuition kind of connects or gets a hit to that. But are there other things that might go along with that? Using AI as a tool without letting it necessarily override who I really am?
Yeah, I definitely think AI can be useful and I'm not against it at all. I just think using it cautiously and not overusing it. But if I need advice about something, like for example, my younger daughter was experiencing something and I was intuitive about it at first. I was thinking like, what am I getting about this? What do I need to know? What do I need to tell her? And then to double check what I was getting, I actually typed in all the information into AI and, it came out all of this information, and not all of it was applicable, but there was probably at least 4 different things that I was able to look at it in an even more broad perspective and help her in a deeper way. So it did help in that way. And the same thing, like if you need a cover letter for something, you might type in 8 points that you want in your cover letter and have AI write it, and then cut and paste what AI wrote and then change it around according to how you would write it. So really AI is only helping with maybe like 30% of it, but it's just helping you structure it and maybe word it in a couple of ways better than you would have worded it on your own. So those are just a couple of examples.
Yeah, I like that. Looking up your intuition hits and then having AI help you identify some of those patterns, as we mentioned before. I love that. And I feel like you are a great example of how these things can coexist and work together. Do you feel like that's kind of where you are with both of these topics?
Yeah, definitely. Like even in our publishing company, we have a rule where, people are able to use AI. I think we decided on 20%. And if something sounds too AI, it's becoming kind of obvious, like because AI tends to sound kind of typical when you're reading it and you're wondering like, okay, did this person use AI? So we're very cautious about using it in a resourceful way. So I think the same, even for something like figuring out your travel itinerary or answering a medical question because you can't get a hold of your doctor, and just realizing that it's not always accurate. There may be something that isn't right. So you can't trust it 100% because you're getting quite a big array of information all at one time.
I think that's really an important point there. You can't trust it 100%. I mean, there have been plenty of examples, both with myself and other people, where some of the information that we've gotten from AI have actually been inaccurate. So if you don't have some sort of base knowledge about something, you wouldn't necessarily be able to identify where the errors are. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely, yeah. And it sometimes it exaggerates. Like I know Cheyenne, who's my publishing partner, she looked her name up in what she does, and she has been on a lot of shows and radio shows and things, but it had like exaggerated, like, she was on the Today Show and she was on, Conan O'Brien, and she's like, wow, they think highly of me because she's never been on those shows.
Embellishment. That's pretty
Yeah,
funny, and it can be costly too, right? So I wonder how you would correct that even, if
I
you
don't
notice
even
those
know.
errors on there, I wonder what you could do, or should you do something about it? That's interesting.
Yeah, I know. I'm not sure.
So this kind of gets to my next wondering, if you will. You've already touched on it, but if you want to add some things, that would be great. Have you seen moments where technology sharpens intuition rather than dulls it? And like your example with your daughter, I think is a great one of that. But is there anything else you want to add to that topic?
I don't know if it sharpens your actual intuition, but it sharpens your awareness of how you use your intuition. So, for example, if somebody, like I get all of the ways of receiving information, so clairvoyance, clairaudience, all of them. And so if I look up something and it gives me some different ideas of how to see a situation, it might give me ways of gathering that information, like, oh, now I see these 3 points, and now I'm more open to receive these messages. I know I need to receive them in a way that I'll feel them, or I know I need to receive them by asking, like, okay, universe, is this correct, or what else do I need to know about these 3 points? And a lot of times the answers will come, but I don't really think it's more than knowledge, like, oh, this is how you see auras, or these are the type of signs from the universe you might receive. So you get awareness from AI. It's like you're going to school or something and you're receiving all of this information, but then you have to be the one to open your heart and mind and consciousness and do the work to enhance your intuition and receive the messages intuitively.
Okay, I'm going to check my understanding of all that because that's a mouthful of information. I feel like what I heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, is there's lots of different ways to use intuition gathering data points, right? From auras, from knowingness, symbolic things, the way you take in information, but the intuition part of that is how you interpret all of that. How did I do?
Yeah, it's how you receive messages. And so, a lot of times I'll be speaking somewhere and I'll ask a group of women, how many of you feel you're intuitive? And it's really common that probably about 20 to 30% only raise their hand. And really everyone has the ability to be intuitive. But you have to do the spiritual work, the healing work, the deep work. If you have too much emotional baggage, too many things you've gone through and you haven't healed those things, a lot of times what happens is you're kind of overwhelmed with information and emotion, and that part of you gets shut off because your body, your consciousness is so busy trying to process all of these emotions that haven't been healed yet, that your intuition isn't as present and you're not as aware of it. But the more healing work you do, the more you read on intuition and become aware of what it is and how you receive messages, and you practice the different ways of receiving intuitive messages, the stronger your intuition gets. And then you're able to, most people can receive intuitive messages in at least one way.
So then it is kind of like a muscle. You can develop your muscle, use your muscle, cultivate your muscle, and then it works better for you. Is that
right? It's your sixth sense. So we have all the five senses, and if you want to develop the sixth sense, which is when you're using your intuition, you have to remove blocks to be open to it.
Love that. So we're starting to talk about some solutions, right? If people feel like they're losing themselves, you've given lots of personal examples of how you do that and how it works for you. Do you have any thoughts on like an easy practice? Let's say I'm a woman and I have not checked in with my intuition or don't feel like I've used it in a long time. What's a way or a couple ways that we could check in with ourselves, with our intuition, before turning to AI or any kind of external input before we just use that?
Right. I would say journaling is really good. Like you could journal, just see what comes out of your pen. So you could either journal regular, like with just you writing, or you could try automatic writing where you kind of just let your pen write and say, what do I need to know at this moment? And see what comes to you. So that's a good practice, as well as just, I like to go walking in nature and start to open up all my senses. Like, what do I see? What do I hear? What do I feel? And then what do I sense? And are there any messages for me? And just kind of being open to seeing what comes in. And it takes practice, throughout the week, kind of noticing like, oh, who am I thinking is going to call me this week? Or what do I feel is important to me this week? And if something unique comes in, seeing when you're right. Like, oh, was I right about that person calling me? Was I right that I needed to know that this week? And it helps you, the more you kind of pat yourself on the back and say, hey, I was right. Then you start to notice the ways you receive intuition, and it helps you enhance and develop your intuition even further.
So what I'm hearing you say, it's sort of like constant refinement. I've learned that I'm taking in some things, I'm noticing some things, and the more I do it and tune into it, the better at it I get.
Right, absolutely.
I love that. Okay, let's say I start to do that. And there are times in conversations I've had with other people where they feel like they're tuning into their intuition, but maybe there's not a lot of clarity. So how can I begin to tell the difference between my intuition, a fear, or some past events and conditioning that have just become a part of me?
Right. I mean, I feel like what happens is the ego gets in the way, and we start to, it's either sometimes ego or sometimes just thoughts that are coming in. And so practice, of when you're right helps you know the difference. But also, I mean, really, it's taken me years of doing healing work. Like I've worked with healers and somatic therapists and other types of therapists, as well as done a lot of healing work on myself using books, watching videos, journaling, working with other intuitives. So I've just been on this quest to be as enlightened as I can. And so the more you shed the ego in that way, the more free and light you become. Life becomes easier, more joyful in many ways. And then you're not as often doubting the intuition that comes in. Of course, sometimes you have those moments still, but you get more in tune with who you really are. And so the intuition is actually more present a lot of times than any of the other. And the ego really doesn't show up much at all.
I love that. What I'm hearing you say is this has been a long time process. It isn't a destination where it's like, yay, I'm an intuitive now. It's like an every day, every week, however often people tune into this refinement over time. So you help yourself heal better.
Right. I love how you call it refinement, because it is. It's like I started doing intuitive readings like 22 years ago, and I was intuitive, but I definitely would say now, this many years later, I'm probably like 80% more intuitive than I was when I started, because you're really never done doing the work. And as long as you don't look at it as like typical work and you're looking at it as a fascinating journey, then you'll always want to continue it, just like working out or, eating right or becoming a better person.
I love that. It's lifelong healing. I love that.
Right.
Okay, I'm going to throw something out there because I'd like your feedback on it, and then we'll close. When I was researching this topic, it was interesting that a few things came up for me. We're familiar with IQ, intelligence quotient. I think most of us are familiar with EQ and looking at emotional quotient as well. And I started delving deeper into my own intuition. Thank you for that. And the concept of grounded intelligence quotient, GQ, but not in the men's fashion perspective, and talking about staying anchored in our body in order to help us with that intuition refinement, like an inner knowing while navigating complexity, speed, and noise. Because let's be honest, the speed of information is not going to slow down. It's only going to speed up. And if we don't ground ourselves, then we will get lost in that and we will feel untethered and unanchored. So when I just throw the term out there, grounded intelligence quotient, I'm just kind of wondering what your reaction or feedback would be to a concept like that.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, you could either become, like, it's very important to stay grounded as a person, that you're a person, you're a human here on Earth. And so you're supported and safe with Mother Earth, reminding yourself of that at the same time as connecting to, whatever you want to call it, divine intelligence, intuition, universe. And so kind of having a balance of both of those things at the same time. And then some other ways that someone might get lost is getting lost in the ego or getting lost in AI, the news, technology, and kind of losing who they really are. And so, something as simple as just going outside and walking for 20 minutes or going in your bare feet and standing on the grass for 5 minutes and saying, I'm grounded, and then reminding yourself that you're always connected to divine energy and breathing that in is really helpful, because if we're not conscious and aware, we could get lost in just being addicted to AI or, getting lost in our own ego and not even realizing it.
I love that. So then maybe the question isn't, will AI replace intuition? Because I have started to hear that in some circles. Is this going to replace us, period? But maybe the question is, what kind of human capacities become more important because AI exists?
Exactly. And I love that, because I think that, what I'm seeing in my research is that people are starting to, and it's going to get stronger and stronger, people are starting to crave authenticity, raw realness, vulnerability, things that are very human and maybe even considered old school now, because there's so much, robotics and AI and technology and people using filters, like I said, and just a lot of fakeness and performative behavior that you're questioning whether it's even real. So people are drawn to those who are extremely real and raw, which is refreshing for those of us who actually pride ourselves on that. So I think that's, there is no substitute for true human, consciousness and intuition, even if AI is accurate sometimes. But I will say something interesting. When I was on an AI workshop, one of the women who's very deep and, kind of a transformational leader, she talked about how she believed AI is related to oneness in the universal mind. Like everything already exists out there that is supposed to be. Mm-hmm. So AI is just one of those things, just like we sometimes grab from ideas that just pop in, and those could be from the universe, from universal intelligence. And so she was saying AI is the same thing. Like it just is part of what is the journey and what always is. So I know that's extremely deep, but I thought that was an interesting thing to contemplate.
I love that. And it just reminds me of some reading that I used to do about Carl Jung and his talk about the collective unconscious, which is also deep, but it does all stem from one place. I guess what we're focusing on here today is to not just get lost in it, but be able to ground yourself so you can reflect on what you're taking in and guide that rather than just become untethered.
Exactly. Yes.
All right. So not only can we coexist with these algorithms, we can find a way to deepen both. It's not a replacement or an either or, but how do we navigate being intentional about that? Does that sound like a fair summary?
Absolutely. And I loved this conversation. I think I learned a lot from talking with you about it.
I just love this topic. It's interesting because it's just going to, I think, become more and more prevalent. So, Kim, thank you so much for taking the time and joining me here today to chat about this topic. And I know that this can help us return to ourselves, which is what I'm all about with our audience here. If listeners had other questions for you in your work as an intuitive or any of the other things that you do so well, they had questions or wanted to reach out to learn more, how could they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I'll just give two websites real quick. So the publishing company website is publishing-joy.com. And then my website is kimsomers-egelsee.com. So it's Kim and then SOMERSEGELSEE.com.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Liz.
Next week in episode 4, we are going to be talking about midlife identity and the algorithm. We are going to explore midlife and our digital mirror. I know you're going to be intrigued by that topic, so go ahead and hit the follow button. Remember to tune into your intuition before, during, and after tapping away. And if something in this episode resonated with you, please take a moment to reflect on what it's asking you to notice or remember. And until next time, returners, keep coming home to yourselves.